What's up, guys? All right, we are talking about energy system training today. So this is another one of the mistakes that I see when preparing for the Open, is people's energy system training not setting them up for the most success during the Open. So at the top here, I have comparisons of 400-meter time trial versus a 1 mile time trial versus 12-minute AMRAP. So the concept there is to just look at the difference in training for these different tests. So if you look back at track workouts and how they train for 400-meter time trials or mile time trials, it's obviously not, and this is common sense, but for some reason it doesn't connect to CrossFit all the time or fitness. But if your race is a 400-meter run, 400-meter time trial, then you don't just run 400 meters every day expecting that to be the optimal training for your testing. And even more so, you don't just vary a little bit and run, say, 200 meters to 600 meters once a day, and that be your training for the race. Even with a little bit longer, a mile run, same thing. We don't run a mile every day, or we don't run 800 meters to 2.5 miles in training. Both of these tests, we do a lot more volume than this. Lead farther away from the test. If the test is a year away, or even more so, like for the Olympics, if it's 4 years away, then what we're doing early on in that training is building the volume and building a big base, big aerobic base, so that we can peak for that one particular race. So if we do this for a 400-meter race that only takes less than a minute, and a lot of our training sessions are volume, much higher volume than that 400-meter time, then why all of a sudden do we have a 9-minute AMRAP or a 12-minute AMRAP? And we know that that's kind of our testing for the Open, is kind of that 8 to 15-minute range. Sometimes we've had 20 minutes, sometimes a little bit shorter, but generally speaking, that 8 to 15-minute range. But we can't just look at that and say, all right, let's just do 8 to 15-minute tests every day, and that'll be our training for the Open. We have to look at it the same. If we take out, we're not talking about muscle endurance, muscle efficiency, movement mechanics, all that kind of other things, the weight, all that things can be limiters in these workouts. We're stripping all that down, and today all we're looking at is the energy system specifically. So we'll get to the other stuff later, but today like I said, all we're looking at is the energy system. So basically with the aerobic training, so if we're looking at it from a bird's eye view and just looking at aerobic training and anaerobic training, not getting into the details of that, even just keeping it pretty layman's terms right now, the farther away from the competition, so let's say 12 months out, as it says here, the higher the volume of aerobic training and the lower the intensity of the aerobic training. 6 months, a little bit reversed, about medium and medium. And then 1 month out, we're lower volume aerobic work and higher intensity. And the opposite is true for anaerobic. So anaerobic stuff, 12-month out is very high intensity, very low volume, and maybe not at all, depending on the athlete. And I would suggest that it would not be put in there all year round. Depending on the athlete, they may only need it for the last 3 months or so for the training. But when you're really trying to optimize strength performance or strength gains, the anaerobic needs to be limited. So that's why I say that. And as we get closer, we're going to peak that and get lower intensity, higher volume. And I'll kind of explain why that is. That's not going to always be the case, but for our sport, it is going to be the case. So with aerobic work, let's say 12 months out, what does it look like to do high volume, low intensity work? Well, we could just get on a rower and go for 60 minutes, or we could make it more applicable to our sport of fitness and do it with mixed modal training. So it may be something as simple as something like around the world, where we do like 10 sets of 1 minute row, 1 minute bike, 1 minute bear crawl, 1 minute jog, and 1 minute jump rope. So that's 5 different things. 10 sets of that at an easy pace would be 50 minutes. That's still pretty cyclical. It still doesn't mimic our sport very much. So it could be where we're doing maybe 60 minutes of work, and maybe it starts with a 5K run, and then for the remaining time we do 500 meters on the rower, 3 wall walks plus a 30-second handstand hold, 60-second farmer's carries, 30-second side plank per side, and 2 Turkish get-ups each arm, or something like that. Where we're doing a little bit more mixed modal stuff, but it's still pretty low intensity. I would say if you're doing 60 minutes of work straight, trying to keep that at kind of a sub 160 beats per minute heart rate. And then as we get into the middle ground where we're like 6 months out, maybe we're doing something where it's like 4 sets of 10 minutes on, 5 minutes off, or 10 minutes on, 10 minutes off. Mixed modal work where maybe it looks the same for all 10 minutes, all 4 different 10 minutes, or maybe it's different, but it could be something like 10 minutes of row 250, 15 wall balls, and 10 toes to bar. And then the next 10 minutes is run 200, 15 kettlebell swings, 7 ring push-ups. The next 4 minutes could be something different, but you see just from those first two, it's written in a way where I can continuously move through it for 10 minutes straight. And the pacing there should be something that I could hold for 20 minutes straight. So I only hold it for 10 minutes, but I could, if I needed to, hold it for another 10 minutes at that same intensity. So you don't want to go out too hard like a 10-minute AMRAP and then rest 5 minutes and not be able to recover. Each 4-minute block should be the same intensity throughout. So if it were the same work set, so maybe it's that row 250, 15 wall balls, and 7 toes to bar, something like that. The last round, you should be able to get more round. The last 10-minute block, you should be able to get more rounds and reps than the first one. So that's kind of a way to pace that out to make sure it's an aerobic pace. And then 1 month out could be a little bit higher intensity. So maybe we're looking at 3 minutes of work at a 85 to 90% effort, 1 to 3 minutes rest, times 6 or 7 sets, 7 or 8 sets. So the work here could be a little bit higher turnover. So maybe it's 7 chest to bar pull-ups and 10 thrusters at 95 pounds. Just those 2 movements for 3 minutes. Be a pretty fast turnover, but a pace that you can sustain for all 3 minutes. So kind of, and it's again designed in a way where you can keep that heart rate up going pretty good. So the 12 months out is kind of at this intensity where you're just kind of cyclically going, moving steadily through it, not going too fast. And then 6 months out, it's picking up the pace a little bit, but it's still a good aerobic effort, and you're being able to move through it at a good steady pace. And then 1 month out, that intensity is a little bit higher, but you're still being able to keep that engine going throughout the whole block of work that you have there. Again, we're not talking about muscle endurance or building muscle and muscle capacity, muscular endurance capacity, or anything like that. We're just talking about the energy system itself. So anaerobic training would be, like I said, kind of on the opposite end of the spectrum, because our testing is 8 to 15 minute time range. We don't want to peak our anaerobic system in the sense of peaking it for max power output. That would be someone peaking for a 100-meter sprint or something like that is where we'd want to peak that anaerobic power. But since ours is a little bit longer, we want to start with a very high turnover, high pace, more close to the alactic stuff where we're not producing lactate, and then building into the lactic endurance stuff. Again, that's getting a little bit more specific into the anaerobic energy system, but you would start with maybe 10 to 12 second sled sprints. And again, it has to be something where you can get a really high turnover really fast. So if it's 10 to 12 seconds of wall balls, obviously that wouldn't work because that would be really easy. So it would be 10 to 12 second sled sprints with maybe 2 minutes or to make it easy, 148 rest period. So it's every 2 minutes you do a 12-second sprint. That would be on the kind of far away from the competition. And then a little bit closer to the competition, we may do 40 to 75 seconds of work. That may be something like 7 touch and go power cleans at 60% of your 1 rep max, and then 12 bar face and burpees, and then a 30-second bike sprint. So that would be 70-ish seconds of work right there, and then you would get, so that's a minute 10 of work, let's say, and then you would give yourself 5 minutes of rest, and you would want every bit of that rest for that set. You would do that 4 or 5 times. So that's kind of that starting to get pretty nasty, but still manageable. And then 1 month out, you're getting into the really painful stuff where you're going for 2.5 to 4 minutes straight at a really high pace and a really painful, it's kind of suicide pace. And then you're resting 10 to 12 minutes, 8 to 10 minutes for the top end athletes, but generally 10 to 12 just for 3 sets. So the volume of the actual work set itself is higher, and the intensity is obviously going to be a little bit lower because you're working for 2.5 to 4 minutes straight. So that could be something You may have seen for the elite level athletes that do Fran every 20 minutes for 3 sets. So if you have somebody that can do Fran sub 3 minutes, rest 17 minutes at the 20-minute mark, they do it again, sub 3 minutes, rest 17 minutes, do it again, sub 3 minutes. It has to be sub 3 minutes or close to it for that to be a lactic training session or anaerobic training session. If it goes from 2:45 to 3:30 to 4:15, then you've completely missed the mark and they're not keeping that good high turnover. So I hope that helps a little bit. Think about energy systems and how they should be laid out throughout the year. Um, we have our Iron Sharp Athlete training plan uh, going right now. It's in progress. We have people in there that have been going through this kind of energy system training for the last couple of years, and they know that when you know time starts getting close to the open, we're getting close to this season where it's December really starts bringing out some of the painful anaerobic stuff and the high end threshold aerobic work. Starts getting really CrossFit looking and really working on that sports specific type stuff is starting right now. So if you have interest in joining in on that online training program, just reply back to this email and I can get you hooked up with that. We can get you going in it, get you in the Facebook group and everything. So let me know if you have any questions. I hope this helps out with how you're laying out your training going forward with your conditioning. That way you can really kind of optimize your performance for the open.